On today's question of faith, should you root for the home team or the team where you live now? Hey everybody, this is Question of Faith. I'm Deacon Mike. I'm the Director of Young Adult Ministry here in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damian Ference, a vicar for evangelization.
Well, I have a dilemma.
Go for it.
It's a big one.
Well, I think I know what it is, but go for it.
Well, so right now our Cleveland Guardians here are in the playoffs. The Guardians play the Yankees in the American League Championship Series. Now, I'm not a Yankee fan, even though I'm from New York. However, the New York Mets are playing the Los Angeles Dodgers in the National League Championship Series. If the Guardians and the Mets advance, I've got a problem.
Yeah.
Because I have followed these Guardians, ride or die all year long, but I grew up as a Mets fan. And the Mets haven't won the World Series in a long time. I was 16 years old the last time they did it. They've been in the World Series a couple of times since then, but have not won it.
Cleveland hasn't won a World Series since 1948, brother.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm with you. Don't worry. And I think I said this to you before. I said, I've seen my team win a World Series. It would really be great to see this team win a World Series. So you can see where I'm sort of leaning already. But one of my colleagues said, well, if the Mets and the Guardians get in the World Series, you can't lose.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was like, well,
you can't. You should still root for the Guardians because they're the ultimate underdog, and I think Christians should always root for the ultimate underdog. The Indians, Guardians have been in the World Series 3 times in my lifetime, 95, 97, and 2016. 2016 would have been a great year to win because...
Yes, they played the Cubs that year, right? Yeah.
Well, we won the NBA championship earlier that year, and then it was the year my dad died too in May, and I thought, man, what a year to win Cleveland championships. But we were up 3-1 and then blew that 3-1 lead, just as Golden State was up 3-1 and blew their lead and the Cavs won. But yes, so I understand the dilemma, but I talked to someone recently. I did a podcast with Chris Scalia about the Hillbilly Thomist book. He asked me, he said, you are so pro-Cleveland. Why do you love Cleveland so much? And because I talk about it a lot and post online. I said, because it's home.
Yeah.
And I think people who aren't somehow proud of their home, even if they've had a hard time there, even if they've suffered or some terrible things that happen, there's something about where you're from that's always going to matter. And I think you should probably root for the Mets if they play the Guardians because that's your home. It's where you're from, and there's something to be said about that. I lived in D.C. for a couple years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
It was the first year, actually, that Nationals Park opened because Benedict the 16th came there, I want to say April 14th or May 14th or something,
around,
2008.
Yeah,
and that was the first event there, in fact.
That's right.
And I was there.
Ah, nice.
And I went to a Nationals game, but I would root for the Nationals as long as they weren't playing the Indians at the time or the Guardians. And I used to go. I saw the Wizards play, and so I would root for another team unless they were playing Cleveland. I'm always rooting for Cleveland.
Sure.
How could I? I would betray my land.
And that's it. Now, so it's a little bit of a backstory. So I covered baseball when I was in the media, right? And I was basically the backup locker room reporter. So Susan Waldman covered the Yankees, Ed Coleman covered the Mets, and what they would do is they would send me to the opposing team's locker room, and I'd interview whoever was the star of the game or the go to the game even, and then I'd bring something back. And if I got anything good, they'd use it and they'd give me credit. WFAN's Mike Hayes caught up with Mo Vaughn after the game, and here's what Mo Vaughn said, right? And sometimes I'd use my question to be nice, and get my voice in the air, which was nice of them to do. And the Mets treated me and my media colleagues so horribly that I stopped rooting for the Mets at one point. Now, I'd rather chew my left arm off than root for the Yankees. I mean, it's like rooting for the Roadrunner,
Yeah.
It's like, and when I grew up with a bunch of people in the neighborhood who were like diehard Yankee fans in the late 70s when I was really little, right? And the Yankees won the World Series like every year then. Well, only 2 years, but still.
Yeah.
They were in the World Series 3 years in a row that time. There was 76, 77, 78. And they lost in 76 to the Reds, beat the Dodgers in 77 and 78. And so I just hated the Yankees because I wanted to root for the Mets. I wanted to root for someone else. I was sort of contrarian at the time. And so I grew up with the Mets, and then they won the World Series in 1986, greatest year ever. And since then, until I covered them, I was a diehard Met fan, and they kind of ruined it for a little while. I was like, boy, these guys are jerks. It was the Bobby Bonilla, Brett Saberhagen, Vince Coleman Mets. The ones that squirted bleach at the reporters one time, and really hurt somebody too. Lit firecrackers in front of the media one day. Say what you want about the media. I mean, we're not fun to be around sometimes, but still. And so I kind of stopped rooting for a while, but now nobody's involved with the Mets who were from that era, so I kind of have come back into the fold, and I have followed them this year for a good deal of it.
And they have Frankie Lindor, who used to play for us.
Correct.
Now that's often what has made good teams great, is that they get former Cleveland players on their team, because we are a small market team. Of the 4 teams that are currently in the MLB playoffs, we have by far the smallest market and the smallest payroll.
Yes, correct.
And
that was part of my homily last week. Your money will not save you, especially if you're the Yankees, the Mets, or the Dodgers.
Yeah, and so again, if you're a Christian, you should be rooting for the little guy here, the little David going up against Goliath. So New York, it's a city I love. I just got back from there for the weekend, and L.A. and then Cleveland. So. Cleveland against the world.
I think we're all in agreement that LA needs to lose.
Yeah,
I cannot stand the Dodgers.
Well, I don't like the Yankees.
Yeah, I don't like the Yankees either.
However, if the Yankees were playing the Dodgers, I'd probably root for the Yankees.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Because I like New York more than I like LA.
And I would say this, that when I covered the Yankees and the Mets, the Yankees treated me very, very well, and I covered the World Series with them in '96, and I still have a champagne-soaked shirt that still smells like champagne to this day. From that, and that was a lot of fun. But again, I'd rather chew my left arm. I mean, I've had so many good Yankee experiences that I'm not sure why I'm not a Yankee fan, is what a lot of my friends will say. So the first game I ever went to with my dad was the day after Thurman Munson died, or it was the day of Thurman Munson's funeral, I should say. And Bobby Mercer gave the eulogy at Thurman Munson's funeral. And for those who don't know, Thurman Munson was a Yankee catcher who died in a plane crash. That he had a private plane, and he would fly it from New York to Canton, Ohio. He did not live far from where we are right now, so he could be closer to his family and make it easier for him to see his family. Well, he miscalculated in the plane crash, and he died. And so I go to this game with my Little League team and my dad. And Bobby Mercer gave the eulogy that day, and they were going to give him the night off because it was just, he was just so emotionally drained. And he went to Billy Martin, who was the manager, and said, Billy, I think I want to play tonight. It's like, yeah? And he was like, yeah, I can play. So he put him in the lineup. He crushes a home run to cut the Baltimore lead to 4-3. And then he gets up in the bottom of the ninth and hits a game-winning single to drive in the 2 runs, gets all 5 RBIs in the game, and the Yankees win 5-4. And the whole place was like crying. Everybody's huddled around him out in the field. It was it was the first game I've ever been to. It was at Yankee Stadium, and I hated that I was going to Yankee Stadium because I was a Mets fan.
Yep.
But what a game, And I was like, well, maybe these guys aren't so bad. And I was like, no, come on. Let's not be ridiculous.
I never went to the old Yankee Stadium, but 2 years ago, I was on fall break in New York City, and the Guardians were playing, or I don't know if they were still the Indians 2 years ago, Guardians, whatever. And it was Game 3, and we won in New York, and that was something. And then last night, Father Eric Garris and I were in the city for the weekend. And we had hoped, when I planned this trip, I thought maybe we'd play the Yankees and maybe we'd see them play Sunday or a Monday afternoon game. So I got a flight out at 9 p.m. Well, lo and behold, the game was at Yankee Stadium at 7 p.m. So we were watching on his iPad, and it didn't end well.
No.
And you know what else didn't end well? That someone decided to take off on the wrong runway at 8:40. So we got delayed getting out of there by until 10:30 because they had to reroute all the planes. It was a mess. But so we lost the game, and as we were taking off, we flew over the Bronx, and I saw Yankee Stadium glowing there. And let me say this now too. Mr. Travis Kelce was there last night with his girlfriend,
yes,
Taylor Swift. Yeah, but you know what's bull? He didn't have any Cleveland gear on.
Ooh.
And he's from Cleveland. And he's so proud. But come on, Travis.
Got to represent.
I mean, you could go in there just dressed in your New York black, but then put on like the Guardians baseball hat or something. Give a little something to tea. Because, you know, eventually you're going to marry her. You know that. And your family's from Cleveland. And Cleveland wants to embrace Taylor Swift. New York already likes her. But come on.
That's true.
Come on. I was a little disappointed, you know.
Well, at least he was there.
Everyone thinks it's cool to like, and like LeBron James used to like the Yankees, and I guess he still does. It is America's team, and it's easy to like teams that win all the time.
Yeah,
but
like I said, it's like rooting for the Roadrunner. Yeah, it's like, my wife has asked me. She goes, "How many championships have the Yankees won?" I said, 27. Don't remind me.
Yeah, it's as Flannery O'Connor says, it's much harder to believe than it's much harder to not believe than believe.
Right.
And I think the same is true when it comes to being a Cleveland sports fan. But
I think
let's not talk about the Browns, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I wasn't. About
this isn't a sports talk show, but we're talking about faith.
That's right. Well, our faith does lead us to these things sometimes. You know, like,
certainly.
About dedication and about community in some ways, right? You know, and discernment. You know, like how do you discern what team to root for? You know. Now, did you always just rooted for the Browns and the Guardian or the Indians at the time? Then,
and the Caps.
Yeah, and the Caps, always.
Cleveland sports all the way through, yeah.
Right. Never tempted by another team?
Not that I recall.
Yeah. I was going to say, you do seem pretty enamored by it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and keep in mind, I've lived here most of my life.
Yeah,
2 years in D.C. and 3 in Rome, but all my studies and my friends, like my home is, Cleveland is certainly home to me. Born and baptized, you know.
And I got to tell you, I'm just happy to be back in a city that has Major League Baseball again, because I lived in Buffalo for 11 years where they had a minor league baseball team, but you know no one goes. and again, sort of like the Yankees, I'd rather chew my left arm off than root for the Bills, who beat my Jets last night. That was a horrible game.
I like the Bills. Well, because again, it's city. It's city. So if we're not playing them, I like the Bills.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Bills at all, mostly because when I was 11, they were playing the Jets in the playoffs, and the Jets were playing pretty well, but they were down by 4 in the fourth quarter. And this guy, Derek Gaffney, was one of their wide receivers, and he had like the game of his life. He was like 4 for 90 or something with at least one touchdown. And they drop back, and the quarterback was this guy named Richard Todd, and he goes to throw the ball into the end zone, and here's Derek Gaffney, arms outstretched, and this Bills defensive back jumped up and intercepted it, and that ended the game. And I was like, and my little 11-year-old heart was crushed. And there was this one and I was watching it in my church hall with the altar boys. We were we had like a little gathering just to watch a Jet game. And there was this one Bills fan in there. I don't know how he got out of there alive, but we chased him around the church hall, tackled him to the ground.
Have the Jets won a Super Bowl?
69.
All right, that's good enough. Browns never have.
Yeah, but I wasn't alive, then neither were you.
Yeah, but it's still...
That's true.
They at least won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the Browns
have not.
And it doesn't look like they're going to win this year. But
no.
What can you do?
Well, we can go to church.
We can. And so you went to church in Manhattan, right?
Yeah. Yesterday, Father Garris and I, we went uptown to the Cloisters. He had never been.
Oh, that's a great place.
If you've never been there.
That's a hidden gem of New York.
Yeah. Rockefeller purchased a bunch of old parts of monasteries in Europe and then had them reassembled in this wonderful museum that pretty much houses all medieval art. And most of it's Christian art. And it's a gorgeous place to see that kind of art because it feels like it's sitting in its natural habitat. And it's beautiful. Then we went down to the Met because they're owned by the same museum, so you don't have to pay twice.
Pass of the day,
Yeah. And then we wanted to visit some churches, so we went to Vincent Ferrer, which is the Dominican church on 66th and Lexington.
Correct.
And then we had to walk around the Columbus Day Parade because that was getting ready and there were streets closed down, but we went into St. Pat's, so took some time for prayer in each. Pierre Toussaint, who was the black Catholic who helped pay for the old St. Patrick's Cathedral, is now in the new St. Patrick's Cathedral. And because I visited the old one last time and I wanted to pray at his body, but they moved it uptown. So I prayed there a little bit too, and at the St. Joseph altar, and then from the Blessed Sacrament, and then then we headed back home.
Yeah, Mary and I went to St. Patrick's when we were last in New York, a couple weeks before you were there, and she has a great devotion to St. Elizabeth Ann's Seat, has a side altar there, so we prayed there for a little while.
Yeah, we were going to go up and see Cabrini's tomb, but it was closed on Monday.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's weird.
Yeah. A cool thing about St. Patrick's Cathedral, if you're not aware, you are, I'm sure, but they hang cardinals' hats up on the ceiling.
Okay,
They're red hats.
I'm glad that you said that because I was looking for them the last time I was there.
Yeah, there's one on the side. I noticed it, and it's got the tassels along the side.
Okay.
So the tradition is they hang the cardinal's hat up there to remind people to pray for the cardinal, and when it corrupts, the material that the hat is made of corrupts enough and it falls to the ground, that's when you know he's finally out of purgatory and into heaven. I think that's a pretty cool tradition.
The other cool story, and I don't know the name of the archbishop, but there were most of the cardinal archbishops of New York have been Irish. There is one who is French, and I don't remember the year, and I don't remember his name. It's horrible. I should have looked this up before I came on, but I didn't know we were going to talk about this. And when he was dying, he said that he wanted to be buried on the sidewalk side of St. Patrick's, so that he would be out on the sidewalks. He said, because these Irish people have been walking all over me the whole time I've been here. They might as well keep doing it.
I know there's one archbishop who has never made a cardinal, and he was an Americanist, and he got in some serious battles with Dorothy Day. Yes. We should have Father Joe Mamich on one day to talk about him because he's a big American Catholic history buff. But yeah, there's a lot of... If you've not been in New York City, it's a great city to visit, and there's beautiful churches there too. So
yeah.
And it's nice when they're open.
Yeah, and my home parish, St. Paul the Apostle, is the second biggest next to St. Patrick's.
Oh, really?
In the city. It's also very lovely. And Isaac Hecker, who's an American Catholic, who's the founder of the Paulists, he's buried there also.
He's up for something venerableness?
Yeah, he's servant of God, and so they're doing the cause now.
That's cool.
It's been going pretty well.
Cool.
But yeah, so St. Vincent Ferrer in Manhattan. Anything special about St. Vincent's that?
Beautiful windows. It's clean. It's one of those churches when you go in, even if you weren't a believer, you'd be like, this is a holy place. I want to kneel down and pray now.
Great. I'm trying to remember if I've ever been there. I've definitely walked past, and I've definitely been there for a meeting, but I think I was only in the rectory for the meeting. I'm not sure if I've ever been in the church. So next time I'm back home, I will be there. So I'm still caught in this dilemma between the Mets and the Guardians, but that's okay.
Well, they both have to win their series.
They both have to win their
first,
series first, so
let's
let's wait until we get there, right? Yeah. But I would say that I am leaning at least toward the Guardians a little bit, only because I'm not a big Pete Alonso fan, and you said things about home. Cleveland just recently probably has really started to feel like home. And not necessarily more than New York. Home is home, right?
Yeah.
But we've kind of settled in here. We kind of feel like this is home now. It's been nice.
Do you know if who would be the home team if do we have a better record than the Mets? Do you know that? Because the Yankees,
yes, they do. We do because you won the division.
Okay.
And the Mets were the wild card.
Oh, okay. So we would have home. That'd be cool.
Have home. Yeah, you have home field.
And it's 2-3-2, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be good. All right. So scripture for this week. I'll be preaching this week. Gospel. Who's the greatest?
Right.
Can we sit at your right? James and John go to Jesus and say, "Can we sit at your right and your left?" It is not for me to give. He says. I always think about, did you ever have to go and ask for a raise or a promotion from your boss? And then if you got it, the rest of the employees all resented you, even though you were the one who had the guts to go and ask. And I was like, the rest of the disciples, you can only imagine how outlandish they thought this was. And then it becomes not, who do you think you are, but more like, don't you know who I am? And then that's what Jesus rails against at the end. So that's what I'll probably preach on this week.
Well, I'll get to that gospel, but it's set up by the first reading from Isaiah about the suffering servant, which is, Jesus himself. It's the prediction, the prophecy of Isaiah. Because of his affliction, he shall see the light in the fullness of days. Through his suffering, my servant shall justify many, and their guilt he shall bear. And so here's Jesus and James and John, will we be first in the kingdom? And he's saying, okay, what it means to be first in my kingdom is not worldly power and authority the way that you normally think about it. It's actually going to entail great suffering on your behalf and the complete emptying of yourself, which eventually they understand, but only after Jesus himself goes through his death and resurrection. And I think a good reminder to people, and I need it too constantly, is that your suffering does have meaning, especially when it feels like it doesn't and you feel like quitting. Like, stay in it because the Lord is at work. And the Lord himself 3 times in the garden said, let this cup pass from me. And even on the cross, his experience of abandonment was real. Like, God, oh God, why have you forsaken me? But the Father never forsook, that's a word, right?
I think
the
so.
Son, and pulled him through it. But man, a lot of times when you're really going through the most transformational moments in your life, it feels like you're death. Because it is, because you're dying to an old way of being and being transformed into something new. So that's very important to keep in mind. And I'm preaching myself there too. So.
Yeah, same, right? Yeah. And if you don't suffer, you don't grow.
Yeah.
You know, that's the main thing. So you want to grow.
Yep.
Darn it.
Yeah. That darn Paschal mystery again.
I know.
Yeah.
It keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Anyway, glad you had a good time in New York. And go Guardians.
Go Guardians.
Go Mets.
That's right.
And hopefully we'll see both of those teams in the World Series. We'll have this and a whole lot more next time here on Question of Faith.